first classical guitar lesson, I'm going to recommend something that might seem a little counterintuitive at first, which is to not play your guitar. We're just going to learn to be prepared to play, and that's actually a lot. Don't even pick up your guitar yet, and we want to think about how we're sitting. We want to sit on a reasonably firm surface, and we have these things called sits bones. But I like to think of them as sits bones because we sit on them. They're sort of shaped like rockers, and I want you to try to rock back and forth a little bit on them. Now, where is your center of gravity? When you stand, it's kind of down here, but when you're sitting, it's a little higher up. Try to sit in a way where you're not rigidly holding yourself upright, but you're allowing yourself to rock gently back and forth, balancing your center of gravity over your sits bones. Your head has a center of gravity as well, and it's meant to balance on the top of your spine in a way that takes very little muscular effort. So I recommend going through a little pre-flight checklist each time before you play. And the first thing is to sit on your sits bones and allow yourself to rock back and forth a little to make sure you're balancing. And then think of your head freely nodding and finding its balance at the same time. Before we actually hold our guitars, let's just pretend to first, because we want to figure out how we're going to hold ourselves, and then we'll bring the guitar into the equation. We'll try to bend both elbows sort of equally, and we'll try to keep our shoulders level and stay level, at least as our default position. It would be nice if we could just do this and find the guitar fretboard right here. Let's assume this is going to be around the 5th or 7th fret. This hand is going to be a little out front and with the fingers pointed in towards ourselves. And with both hands to play, we're just going to simply wiggle our fingers. For classical guitar, the reason why everyone usually has a footstool or some kind of device to hold their guitar up is because it tends to be the most balanced and centered way, and it makes it easier to reach all parts of the neck. I find that when I'm using a footstool, I don't have the same sense of freedom to rock back and forth on my sits bones. And so I personally like to usually use something like a guitar support cushion or one of the other contraptions out there for a guitar support. Now let's pick up our guitars and hold them sort of casually while we go through our checklist. First, we're going to become aware of our center of gravity and try to find its point of balance above our sits bones. And then we're going to allow our head to loosely nod a little bit down and find its natural place of balance. For classical guitar, we don't want to hold it in a way where the fretting hand has to do any of the work of holding the guitar. And so it's free to deftly move around. So we hold it by resting it on our opposite leg or cushion. We get a little more support from the inside of our other thigh. This bout of the guitar will touch us somewhere near our breastbone. And then quite a lot of the work of holding our guitar still is actually done just by the weight of this arm passively on top. And if you follow the line that the bridge makes, that's usually a pretty good place to start placing your arm. Usually the top tuning machine head is somewhere around eye level, but people have played successfully at lots of different angles. It should be relatively vertical like this, but usually it rests a little bit back and points maybe just 10 or 15 degrees upwards. And let's get a feel for the fact that if we move our elbow back this way, then our arm naturally tends to want to do this and move our hand more away from the strings. And if we kind of slide our elbow down this way, then our fingers naturally stay closer to where the strings are. An interesting factor is the angle of the guitar this way. People don't all agree, but to me it seems like having the guitar go a little forward makes it feel like the left hand doesn't have to reach as far, and it feels a little more equal and it seems to allow my right shoulder to be a little more naturally relaxed. But you should play with these things and continue to experiment with them over the long term. And people don't agree, so you are allowed to experiment. Now we'll start to touch the strings. We call the playing hand fingers PIMA, and it's from the Latin names for the fingers. Very few classical players use the pinky on the plucking hand, and it's because it's a little too short to get in the same plane as the others. The middle finger is a little too long, but we can just curl it up a little bit in order to bring I, M, and A all in the same line. And our right hand a little bit cups or squeezes gently together. Let's prepare our right hand by placing the fingers I, M, and A just resting on the first 3 strings. And then the thumb will go on the 4th string, but it should be in front of the fingers this way to allow the natural movements of the fingers and the thumb. Don't try to have really straight or really bent fingers. The middle of the range of motion for each knuckle would be a good place to start. Let's just talk a little bit about the fretting hand before we do anything with it. On this hand, we do use all 4 fingers, and we call them 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the thumb, we'll just call it T. Let's start with the placement of the thumb. Don't worry about the fingers yet. We can learn to play much more easily if we just keep our thumb sort of up. And we don't need to bend it very much in any direction. And just the tip of our thumb is going to touch the neck in the middle of the back. And so we have a big space here. The 3 sort of classic ways to do it wrong are to grab it like this, with the thumb way over and touching the fretboard here. Or like this with the thumb bent, or with the thumb sticking sideways and touching at the base. And then when we look at a classical guitarist's left hand, I always thought that the way they were getting their fingers to be so arched and nicely landing on the fingertips was by using this really good grip strength. But the thing is, it's not really like that. For a second, just shake out your hands and wrists and let them be really relaxed, and just let your fingers dangle down like this. If we just let our hand feel completely passed out like this, and then we turn it over this way, our fingers will effortlessly point back in the exact direction that we want them to be. And so I just want to see how our hand will approximately be, which is with our thumb up and our fingers effortlessly pointing back towards ourselves. In a moment, we're going to touch our 4 fingers all to the same string. But first, I just want to become aware of another thing, which is the degree of rotation of our forearm. A good way to think of it is that this knuckle and this one should be parallel to the neck. We can deviate from this position when it helps us, and so we can rotate this way or that. But we'll start like this as our neutral position. The most common thing by far is to set up like this, where the index side is closer and the pinky side is farther, which works great for the first 2 fingers, but severely disadvantages the other 2. The other thing is we tend to oppose our thumb to our index finger, but that also tends to favor our stronger fingers at the expense of our weaker ones. And so we should have our thumb at least a little bit this way, maybe just halfway behind our first and second fingers or so. I just want to take a second to prove something to you right now, which is that it is possible to have your thumb up and your fingers curled back towards yourself and still have a relatively straight or neutral wrist. We want to avoid bending our wrist very much in any direction. One of the main things that people tend to do wrong is start too far back this way, which makes it a lot of strain to get onto your fingertips. So we want to be far enough forward this way that if we had to, we could do this. You don't need to push, but just make sure you can do this. And then from there, relax into the shape of pointing towards the strings. So I would say to start in the air first, find that shape, and then try to bring it to your guitar. Ideally, what happens is we have all 4 fingers on the first string, and we have this huge space here. And if we move 1 string over, our thumb and whole hand and wrist all slightly move along with it. Just this whole shape moves around, with the wrist being neutral. So the left hand preparation is to bend at the elbow, and then probably somewhere around the 5th or 7th fret, and maybe on the 2nd or 3rd string, we're just going to touch all 4 left hand fingers to the same string. We're not trying to reach or spread apart or reach any particular frets, but just all 4 fingertips in a row together on the same string. And then from there, we'll just make sure that we're not grabbing it with our thumb up here and that we have a nice space down there. And we're going to make sure that we're not doing anything funky with our thumbs. And we're going to aim for a nice parallel hand position this way. And we just want to feel that feeling of our fingers being delicately passed out and gently touching the string. And we're not pushing, we're just touching the string. And it should take very little effort. And now we have all the elements of what I'm calling being prepared to play. We take a moment to see if we're letting our head be free to nod a little bit and find its own balance. And then we balance our center of gravity over our sit bones. We take a moment to think about how we're holding our guitar. And then we prepare our right hand by placing P, I, M, and A down on the first 4 strings, and the left hand by getting our thumb to the middle or so of the back of the neck. And we're just going to touch all 4 fingers to the same string. That was a lot, but now that you know how to prepare yourself to play, we're ready to start with some of the most fundamental movements in the next video. So don't forget to subscribe and see you next time.